Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. In less than 48 hours, Bernard Hopkins, who is ranked by BoxRec.com as the top light heavyweight in the world, will be taking on his nemesis, Roy Jones Jr., in a light heavyweight revenge match. Is it possible that neither Hopkins nor Roy Jones is the best light heavyweight on the planet? I would say the answer is yes. I disagree with BoxRec.com. I believe the best light heavyweight on the planet is Bad Chad Dawson. And he's taking on Jean Pascal, who has one of the light heavyweight belts in a unification match that's going to take place this summer. Now, it's very important if you're a gambler to separate media hype from reality. While I'm a big fan of Bernard Hopkins, while I believe a Bernard Hopkins fight against David Haye would be competitive based on styles, and yes, I'm talking about the heavyweight champion David Haye, I do not believe that Bernard Hopkins can beat Bad Chad Dawson, nor do I believe that Jean Pascal can beat Bad Chad Dawson. I'm taking Bad Chad Dawson in that fight, and for hardcore gamblers, I'm encouraging you to take a very hard look at Chad Dawson because it is possible that Chad Dawson is the very best boxer in the entire sport. And yes, that includes Pretty Boy Floyd Mayweather. That includes Manny Pacquiao. In other words, Chad Dawson is an elite talent. Um, let's think for a second about Jean Pascal, whose only loss was to now super middleweight champion Carl Froch. Since that fight, Pascal has fought two spirited matches against previously unbeaten Adrian Diacanu. And the important thing to remember in analyzing Diacanu is that he's a hooker, right? Not the street walking kind, right? Not Xavier Hollander. This is boxing. He's a guy who throws hardcore hooks with both hands, kind of like Juan Urango does at a lighter weight. Diacanu cannot fight tall. He cannot fight from distance. He has to get inside, he needs to get up close on you, and he needs to throw hooks to the body. Jean Pascal, based on styles, and Pascal has quick hands and can keep a distance. He knows how to fight backing up. Jean Pascal can beat a hooker like Diacanu. But that's not Chad Dawson. Chad Dawson, who has beaten Antonio Tarver twice and Glenn Johnson twice, is actually a very tall, slender southpaw who, at least he fights out of a southpaw stance. I understand he's a converted southpaw, but Chad Dawson can actually fight you from distance. He is blessed. Whereas Bernard Hopkins is a technician who has studied the sport and who has figured out the proper technique and how to deal with counterpunchers like Winky Wright, who he beat, and how to deal with younger fighters with Mike Pavlik, who he beat. Chad Dawson is entirely different. He is a technician, but Dawson is also gifted with faster hands than Bernard Hopkins, a bigger punch than Bernard Hopkins. Keep in mind, Chad Dawson beat Tomas Ademic, who is now campaigning at heavyweight after winning the cruiserweight title, and Dawson actually put Ademic down in that fight. Dawson can handle slower, more strategic fighters like an Antonio Tarver, but he also can handle volume punchers who come up close and try to smother you like Glenn Johnson. Dawson's trainer, Eddie Mustafa Muhammad himself, is a former light heavyweight champion, and I believe Mustafa Muhammad is one of the best in the business. Normally, when I see a guy fighting out of a converted stance, these fake southpaws who are really right-handed fighters pretending to be southpaws, I would expect them to have some kind of decrease in foot movement, some kind of decrease in hand speed, and inability to be fluid with their punches. Chad Dawson is the exception to the rule. He has great foot movement. He knows how to turn fighters in the ring, and he's very fluid with his punches. Quite frankly, his talent is really exceptional. I believe he is one of those champions. He has a belt who's really an uncrowned champion because, of course, the public is fixated on bigger names like Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones. Um, I think Chad Dawson makes a statement against Jean Pascal. I believe Chad Dawson keeps the fight mechanically sound and is able to strategically take apart Jean Pascal, who, keep in mind, is coming off of major shoulder surgery. If you look at his rematch with Diaconu, you're going to see that Pascal was struggling at times because of his shoulder injury. You need to keep track of fighters' injuries. You need to keep track of fighters' surgeries. Pascal, who already is not as quick-handed as Dawson, is going to be at a distinct disadvantage since, of course, he's coming off of surgery. Pascal, to his credit, is a fighter who will fight anybody. He fought Carl Froch in Nottingham when Carl Froch was undefeated. He then fought Adrian Diaconu when Adrian Diaconu was undefeated. Now he's fighting Chad Dawson when Chad Dawson is undefeated. Now, while I salute Jean Pascal for a willingness to fight anyone, including world-class champions, um, I also have to say that when you see a fighter like Jean Pascal and he is fighting anyone, then you cannot assume that he has looked at the film or his corner has looked at the film and has concluded that they can beat Dawson. I don't think they can. Now, Chad Dawson does have some weaknesses. There are questions about Chad Dawson's chin. Also, Chad Dawson is so technically oriented that the crowd seems to get bored during his fights, and he gives the illusion that his opponent is merely having an off night. In fact, some of his opponents, Antonio Tarver, after his first fight, thought that they had had off nights. I don't think they understand that Chad Dawson systematically strips you of your best weapons and then is able to start to dominate the fight. I like Chad Dawson against Jean Pascal. Don't fool yourself. These two guys are fighting for the real light heavyweight championship. While I respect and love Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones, that fight will be fought at a lower level than Chad Dawson against Jean Pascal. Let me go further. Much like I believe that Bernard Hopkins has a shot against David Haye, I have little doubt that Chad Dawson would have an excellent chance against David Haye because, of course, Chad Dawson, while he doesn't punch as hard as David Haye, and I'm not sure, quite frankly, if anyone outside of Edwin Valero and Vladimir Klitschko hit as hard as David Haye. While Chad Dawson doesn't punch as hard as David Haye, Chad Dawson, in my opinion, is a much more polished fighter who can take you out either outside or inside with either one punch or combinations. I don't think David Haye is as advanced a boxer as Chad Dawson is. So to sum up, I like Chad Dawson against Jean Pascal. Are betting big money, then you may want to straddle the bet with Pascal by knockout. Pascal is not going to outpoint Chad Dawson. Quite frankly, I don't think anybody in the light heavyweight division can outpoint Chad Dawson. He does have a chin that has raised some questions, but certainly if it goes to the cards, Chad Dawson will win this fight. He's my pick in it. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com.